All right. So, what is the most famous study about the about vents in general? Everybody knows it.
ARDSnet.
ARDSnet. Everybody knows the ARDSnet. It's very important. It's actually one of the most important studies in the history of the ICU. In fact, it started in 1996. The collection of patients and the study, and it was published in 2000. And anything below 2000 is dark ages. Anything after 2000 is a kind of a advancement in critical care. So the ARDSnet, when I criticize it, just remember, I'm saying this is one of the best studies in the ICU, because the studies in the ICU, all of them suck. They're bad. They're horrible. We don't have good studies. It's not like cardiology. We don't have drug companies. So the ARDSnet, what they've done is that they took patients who have acute lung injury or ARDS and randomized them to 6 milliliter per kilogram versus 12 milliliter per kilogram tidal volume. And this tidal volume is based on ideal body weight. Right? So these patients that we see all over the place with 500 pounds, 600 pounds, 300 pounds, they'll get 250 cc tidal volume because they're short, for example. Ideal body weight, right? So keep that in mind. Also, they determined that we need 800 patients to power the study to detect mortality. So that's fine, and they started the study, and at the interim analysis at 560 patients, they found that people in this group were dying too frequently, so they became unethical to continue. They terminated the study prematurely and concluded that 6 milliliter per kilogram is better than 12 milliliter per kilogram, which is great. Statistically, makes sense. And it became the standard of care, by the way, as you know. But there are 5 major criticisms for this study. That if you don't know the criticism for the study, by the way, it's nothing, nothing wrong with criticizing the study, because if you don't know the criticism of the study, then you don't know how to treat. Number one, you don't know if it's true or not. Number two, you don't know how to treat the patients on the 5% on the right side of the bell curve, because the studies tell you the average benefit of an intervention for an average patient. It doesn't tell you about those patients that are extreme here, and you have to just use your head based on the criticism. So the first criticism comes from Mass General, or at least some ICUs in Mass General, and they say that it's not the volume that injures the patient, it's the plateau pressure. Based on what? They looked at the Excel sheet for this study. They found that everybody in this group had a plateau pressure more than 30. Everybody in that group had a plateau pressure less than 30. So you have 2 variables. It's not Mass General's problem, it's the study's problem. The study is done with 2 variables, the volume and the plateau. So you can't prove them wrong, right? So it could be both, so we don't know. But I have an inclination to say that it's actually the plateau, not the tidal volume, based on a lot of things that I've seen in life. So for example, let's say Professor Longneck has ARDS, and Professor James Bond 007 has ARDS. So let's say we give both of you volume control, right? But we limit the pressure. We don't allow, in volume control you can limit the pressure. You can say don't give above 30. So we limit the pressure for both of you, and both of you have the same PEEP, but we limit the pressure, and the pressure is 30, maximum plateau is 30. So I give you that, and I give her that. You ended up having 12 milliliter per kilogram from that. I give you that pressure, 30, so let's say I ordered 900 for both of you, tidal volume, right? Above 15 liter. But of course you're not gonna get the 900 because I'm limiting the pressure on the vent. So you're gonna reach 30 and the pressure is the vent is gonna cycle. And you're gonna reach 37. You got 12 milliliter per kilogram, and long neck got 6 milliliter per kilogram. Which one is gonna die?
Not me.
No, she's gonna die. Why? Because you guys are not equal even. Because below 200, that's ARDS, right? So you could be, that's PF ratio, below 200, right? So you could be 195, and she could be 20 PF ratio. She could be much, much worse ARDS than you, but both of you are in the study. So when I give you that, just the fact that with the same pressure you got bigger tidal volume, that means that your lung is much more compliant. So by definition, you're having a head start, and you're not gonna have a problem as opposed to. Same thing we see. So same thing we see when I do, like, let's say bi-level here. We see the patients on bi-level. They actually initially you put them on bi-level. And bi-level gives you when we talk about it tomorrow or the day after, we'll see that it gives a breath over a long period of time. So you can see 6 seconds for a breath as opposed to 1 second another. So potentially we've seen the patients take a big amount of volume there, right? But for the start, when they're sick, they're taking 500 tidal volume, and then every day we see, oh wow, they're taking 800 tidal volume now, with the same pressure. Now they're taking 1200. Now they're taking 1500 tidal volume, and you see that. And 1500 tidal volume, we are, yes, this patient is gonna improved already. Why? Because the compliance is improving. So it's not the tidal volume. It can't be the tidal volume that's injuring the patient. It has to be the pressure. How do we get away from this? How do you do a study? You gotta do the study on pressure control, where you can limit the pressure and then see what the tidal volume for each one is, and just see what tidal volume is gonna affect. You're gonna have to limit one variable, but the volume control is undoable. Moreover, to prove my point a little bit more, is that they actually looked at the patients who are not ARDS patients, and they tried to apply to them the same tidal volume thing, 6 milliliter versus 12 milliliter. They're not ARDS, and they showed no difference. And that study actually was completed. We went all the way to 800 patients. So it was published about 2 years ago. All right. Next criticism is every respiratory therapy department I've seen, they do that. 6 to 8 milliliter per kilogram. They're not going to give the respiratory therapist one number. They have to give him a range, because otherwise, you tell him 6, he gets 6.5. What, are you going to fire him? You can't. So basically, do 6 to 8. So that's why they can play with the range. The point I want to make is that 7 haven't been studied, 8 hasn't been studied, 9 hasn't been studied. We don't know. We know that 6 is better than 12, but we don't know. Maybe 9 is the best. Maybe 8.5 is the best. So we don't know. Number 3, animal studies that actually they took rats, and before this, they took rats and they ventilated them with volume control 15 milliliter per kilogram. They were normal rats, right? And for 2 days, and all of them developed acute lung injury just from the vent volume, and pressure also was high, right? So the point I want to make is that this is for rats, but here they took humans who already have acute lung injury and ARDS and give them 12 milliliter per kilogram, very close to this one, right? That's a crime, because at that time, I was there. I was practicing at that time. There was nobody that's using 12 milliliter per kilogram. Everybody was using 10 milliliter per kilogram. So this is a statistic everybody knows. Researchers can do that sometimes, where they want to prove their point, they exaggerate the other one. Number 4 is a statistical fact, where it means that the side effects. So for example, when drug companies publish their data, they do a 12,000, 15,000, 20,000 patients, cardiology studies. And they found, for example, that Eliquis is better than placebo, and everything is proven and statistically sound, everything is beautiful, and they publish the study. By definition, because the side effects are by definition much more rare than the effects. That's why they call it side effects. If the side effects are the same as the effects, it would be Viagra, right? But the side effects are much more rare than the effects. So that's why in the studies, they can't prove it beyond statistical scrutiny, and they say, we have 10% constipation, we have 5% respiratory depression, we have this and that. You go figure it out. I'm just telling you honestly what we noticed. But then after 1 million doses post-marketing, sometimes million, sometimes 100,000, depending on how the drug is. But after 1 million doses, the company the confetti starts to fly in the air. You know, they start having, you know, parties and press releases and this and that, because there was 1 million doses delivered and nobody have a hamartoma coming out from their ass, for example. You know, nobody developed anything that is untoward that was reported. So that's when they say the side effects. My point here is that when you terminate the study prematurely, you by definition, you underestimated the side effects of the intervention, right? So I don't know, I can't tell anything about that, but look at this curve here. That's in general. I'm not saying this study is that, but in general, just think about it that way. People like to study, to publish positive studies if they can, especially if they're coming up with an intervention, right? But imagine that this is time, this is the mortality, and you're studying two protocols or whatever, and the two protocols at 28 days, they're the same. They're very close to each other. There's no statistical difference. But during the study, if you're collecting data as you go, it will look like this, the curve. And this will look like this. Huh? So if you do your interim analysis here, you're gonna find no difference and we'll continue the study. If you happen that your interim analysis fall here, that means that there's a big difference, and especially if what we're looking at is mortality, the study will be terminated, right? So that's one thing that's terminated prematurely. You can't fix it. It's like, you know, something that is inherent. And then the last thing that is you know, we say that it's a criticism is basically the VCV versus VCV. I think this is funny. This dawned on, I would say, what, 90% of the intensivists. I want you to do this, just do this test for me. Just go in and ask any colleague or something, or attending, whatever. Just ask somebody and say, what is the best mode of ventilation by studies for ARDS? He's going to say volume control. This is the only studied mode of ventilation for ARDS. Well, it's studied against itself. It's not studied against anything else. It took volume control, studied against volume control. It's like, you know, the 3-card Monty? It's like, volume control, 10 milliliter per kilogram, 12 milliliter per kilogram, text is better than 12, and volume control is the best mode of ventilation for ARDS. I heard it from people, intensivists, saying that, why are you using pressure control? Volume control is the only studied mode in ARDS. That's ridiculous, right? So, what is this saying? What this study is saying that if you are a user of volume control, use low tidal volume. That's it, right? If you're a user of any other mode of ventilation, you're gonna wait for your study. You don't have a study yet, okay? But that's not an insignificant statement, because 85% of the vents in the world are volume control. So 85. But if you're one of the 15% that actually like evolved weight, all right. Do we have any other study that actually compared volume control to pressure control? Yes, we do. There's multiple studies, at least 10 of them, or something. You know, that, and all of them showed that pressure control is better than volume control in improving hypoxia. But none of them showed mortality benefits. These studies were all less than 100 patients, so not powered enough to do that. And the challenge is that show me one study that show. If you show me once, here's the bet. If you give me a study that shows that volume control is better than pressure control in anything, I'll give you $50. How about that? That's a good. There's also radiologic studies that were done, and they compared volume control to pressure control inverse ratio, and after the inverse ratio, the picture of the lung looked better, looked like more inflated, right? And that is it.